I was sitting at my desk, looking through investment portfolios, reading the numbers, analyzing them with the usual care, as I do every Tuesday morning, when my phone suddenly lit up with an incoming call from an unknown number. Usually in such cases, I didn't even think about answering, allowing voicemail to deal with endless spam calls, but this time something inside me twitched. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe just a random desire to break the monotony of the working day. Anyway, I reached out, picked up the phone, and, still absently running my eyes over the numbers on the screen, answered. Hello. There was the usual silence in the office, broken only by the steady hum of the air conditioner and the barely audible clicking of keys in neighboring offices. Gaynor. The voice on the other end of the line was slightly shaky, as if the other person was hesitating, not knowing if he was doing the right thing by dialing this number. But I didn't have to wonder who it was for long. I recognized him right away, and it made my stomach clench. It's your mother. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. 12 years. It's been 12 years since I heard that voice, 12 years since I last spoke to any of them, 12 years since the day I decided to sever all ties with my family, isolate myself, and build my own life without their interference, without their toxic favoritism, without constant reminders that who in their eyes really deserved attention and love. I looked up, glancing briefly at my office door, grateful that it was closed. What do you want? I asked, consciously not softening my voice, realizing that I didn't want to do it either. A second of silence on the other end of the line. Take a deep breath. Your father is very ill, Gaynor, she finally said, and there was an unwelcome tremor in her voice. The doctors say he doesn't have much time left. I didn't say anything. We want you to come back to make up, to say goodbye. I slowly turned my gaze to the painting hanging on the wall opposite. An abstract canvas, one of the ones I bought last year, just because I could afford it. Its rich colors once seemed to me to be a symbol of freedom, but now they merged into a solid blur as I stared at them, as if searching for an answer. The silence between us stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Outside, life continued to go on as usual. People were passing by, cars were moving along the streets, the world was spinning as always, but inside my office, time seemed to stop. I'll think about it, I finally said before hanging up the phone without giving her a chance to continue. Of course, she could have tried to manipulate me, as always, she could have played on my guilt, she could have found 1,000 words to convince me, but I didn't give her that chance. I just sat there, staring into the void in front of me, while my coffee cooled on the table, and one by one, memories surfaced in my head, the same ones that I had been trying to bury for years, but which, as it turned out, had not disappeared anywhere. I remembered every neglect, every injustice, every scene in which I was not the main character, but only a shadow in the background. Lily. Her name popped into my mind, and I immediately felt a bitter, long-forgotten resentment rising inside me. I've always been responsible, reasonable, and disciplined. I should have been like this from the moment Lily was born, just 2 years after me. But from the very beginning, it was obvious who was the favorite in this family. Every birthday, every Christmas, every ordinary day, the pattern was repeated over and over again. Lily received new toys, beautiful clothes, and a large portion of dessert. I am practical gifts, guidance, lectures on how an older sister should set an example. When Lily wanted my new colored pencils in the 3rd grade, Mom just said, "Do you know how sensitive Lily is? Share it with her, don't be selfish." I remember Lily grinning over my mom's shoulder. When she threw my favorite book into the pool in a fit of anger, Dad just sighed. Accidents happen. And then he took her to get ice cream to cheer her up. The book was a gift from my beloved teacher, the one who was the first to notice something more in me than just a quiet, persevering girl who completed all tasks without unnecessary questions, the one who not only lectured me on the importance of education, but truly inspired, opened the doors to a world where she could be significant on her own, and not just in her sister's shadow. I remember hiding under a blanket with a flashlight for hours, turning the pages, rereading my favorite chapters, memorizing every phrase, every emotion, because the book became for me something more than just a set of words on paper. It was my refuge, my outlet, my reminder that somewhere there's a world outside our house where I can be important too. But when Lily got angry, when in her next outburst she threw my precious book into the pool, watching how the pages soaked up the water, how the letters blurred, turning into shapeless spots, no one even tried to stop her. No one thought to buy me a new one. Mom just shrugged, muttering something about things coming and going, and Dad just said it was an accident. Later, when Lily got the best grades, they had a whole party, gathered relatives, ordered pizza, raised glasses of champagne and proudly said, "Look at what a smart girl we have, our little Lily." And when I brought home the highest scores, they just nodded condescendingly and said, "We expect this from you, Gaynor. You're older, you have to set an example." And then I realized that if I really want something, I have to achieve it myself. At the age of 16, I started working after school at Joe's Cafe, a small, cozy place frequented by local students, office workers, and retirees, each with their own habits, stories, and experiences. The cafe's manager, Sarah, has become a greater mentor to me than my own mother ever was. She taught me not only how to make the perfect cappuccino and remember regular customers, but also responsibility, economy, and the ability to stand up for myself. She said, "If you want to get out of this life, Gaynor, you have to fight for yourself. No one will do it for you." I saved every penny imagining the day when I could finally build my own life, away from the constant pressure, from injustice, from the eternal need to prove that I also deserve attention. But it was the phone incident that finally opened my eyes to how far favoritization had gone in our family. I saved up for months, saved tips, counted every bill to buy myself a smartphone, nothing special, just a basic model for $100, but it was mine. My first purchase, made solely with my own money, earned through hard work, which I was really proud of. I brought it home, put it on the table, enjoying the feeling of achievement, and then Lily came. "But I want one too," she howled when she saw the box. She reached for my phone, trying to grab it with her small, tenacious fingers. "Gaynor, give it to me." "No," I said firmly, lifting him higher. "I bought it with my own money. If you want to, too, you can save up. You can get a job like me." Lily stomped her foot with force, her face turned red, her eyes filled with tears, and a moment later a cry rang out. "My ma! Dad!" They came running, of course. They always came running when Lily called. Mom from the kitchen, Dad from the study, their faces were full of concern for the suffering of their precious child. "Gaynor," my father said sternly, his expression was painfully familiar to me, "why are you being so selfish? Your sister just wants to see your phone." I clenched my fingers, feeling my voice tremble. "Because he's mine. I worked for him. I earned every penny for him." "You have to love your sister," Mom interjected, her lips pursed, and irritation showed in her voice. "How can you be so cruel? We raised you better." I was looking at them, really looking, and at that moment something fell into place. I realized it wasn't normal. It wasn't fair. It wasn't love. It was something else entirely. I stopped pretending that everything was okay. "I really love Lily," I said softly, still in my own voice, but there was no doubt or fear in it anymore. "But that doesn't mean I have to give her everything I have." I turned around, went into my room, closed the door behind me, and turned the key in the lock, ignoring their voices, the knocking on the door, and Lily's sobs, which I knew too well to accept as real. I knew that they would soon be replaced by demands for something else. That night, lying in my room, for the first time I began to seriously search for colleges in other states, scrolling through university websites, studying programs, tuition fees, possible scholarships, dreaming of escaping in a way I had never dared before. I opened a new document on my laptop and with a sinking heart typed at the top of the page, college application, and this was the first conscious attempt to escape from a life in which I had always been in the background. I remember the day when the enrollment letter arrived, as clearly as if it were yesterday. I was 18, I had just graduated from high school, and my fingers were shaking as I tore open the thick envelope containing my ticket to a new life, the official confirmation of admission to the investment management program in Arizona. I was standing at the counter at Joe's Cafe, where I was still working at the time, and Sarah was leaning against the coffee machine, watching me with bated breath. I read the letter over and over again, not believing my eyes, until I raised my head and whispered, "I got in." And then louder, with a tremor in his voice, but with confidence, "I got in." Sarah screamed, threw a towel on the counter and hugged me tightly, laughing. "I never doubted you, baby." The letter informed me that I had been granted a partial scholarship, which was already more than I could have hoped for, but I still needed about $30,000 to cover the rest of my expenses. And then I remembered the money my grandfather left behind before his death, the very money he spoke about clearly and clearly. "This money is intended for the education of both my granddaughters. Make sure that both girls receive decent education." I was there when he said that, sitting next to him, listening to him repeat the same thing to our parents in a faint voice so that they would remember it once and for all. That day, when I was driving home with a letter from college, full of hope, I thought that maybe this would be the moment when everything would change, when they would finally see me, when they would tell me that they were proud of me, that they were happy for me. I entered the house and found them in the living room. Lily was sprawled on the couch, idly fingering her phone while Mom and Dad were watching TV. "I've been accepted," I announced, holding the letter in my hands, still smiling, still believing that this day would be special for me. Investment management program in Arizona. They'd even give me a partial scholarship. Mom turned off the TV, Dad shifted in his chair. Lily didn't even take her eyes off her phone screen. "That's sweet, honey," Mom said, but there was no joy in her voice, just a strange tightness. "But Arizona is so far away." "This program is exactly what I want to do," I explained, hoping they would understand. "And with Grandpa's money, I can cover the rest of the cost." But before I could finish, Dad interrupted me, clearing his throat. "We don't have that money anymore." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "What?" My voice trembled, and my fingers tightened on the letter. "What do you mean?" "Grandpa left this money specifically for our education." "We both." I felt a shaky sigh escape my lips. "We both had to get them." "Well," Mom smoothed her skirt, avoiding my gaze, "we had to make some investments. Interesting investment opportunities have emerged." I froze, feeling an icy wave roll through my body. "What about the Lilly College Foundation?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I could see it in their faces, in the way Dad looked away, the way Mom tightened her grip on her fingers, and the way Lily didn't even pretend to be interested in the conversation. Dad chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't worry about your sister's education. We'll take care of it." The air in the room became heavy, and suddenly it seemed to me that the walls were slowly shifting, squeezing me into a trap from which there was no way out. "So you spent my share?" My voice was getting louder, but I couldn't control it anymore. "You spent the money Grandpa left me for my education, and then you just kept lying?" "Don't be dramatic," Mom said tiredly, giving me an annoyed look. "You're a smart girl, you've always been able to figure things out. You'll find a way." I looked at them, really looked at them, at Mom's expensive jewelry, at Dad's brand new golf clubs in the corner, at Lily's designer clothes, at the latest iPhone in her hands. "Are you trying to tell me," I said slowly, feeling rage rise in my chest, almost suffocating me, "that you spent the money that Grandpa left for my education on yourself?" "Watch your tone," Dad warned, but I couldn't hear him anymore. "No," I shouted, unable to hold back any longer. "I won't watch my tone. This is wrong." This is so damn wrong. Grandpa wanted this money to go to both of us. Get out, Mom interrupted me sharply, her lips pressed into a thin line. Just get out until you learn to speak to us with respect. I ran out, slamming the door. My heart was pounding, my breathing was racing, and there were tears in my eyes, blurring the road in front of me, but I couldn't afford to cry, couldn't even give them this little bit, this victory, this confidence that they had managed to break me completely. So I just got in the car, I started the engine and headed to the only place where I still felt safe, the only place where I wasn't judged, used, or forced to justify my own existence, a cafe. I worked my shift, barely focusing on orders, on the sounds of the coffee machine, on the familiar movements of my hands, trying to drown out the chaos that was happening in my head, but my thoughts continued to swarm, collide, squeeze my chest with an icy shell, forcing me to return again and again to the moment when my mother said those words, "Just get out." The next day, the morning shift was waiting for me, and I put on my apron again, poured coffee again, put croissants in the window again, pretending that my life wasn't falling apart, that I wasn't facing emptiness, that I wasn't afraid. But Sarah, of course, noticed that something was wrong with me. Not like that. She didn't say anything, didn't ask questions, didn't offer advice, didn't hug me with pity, but just nodded, as if to say, "I'm here when you're ready," and that's probably why I loved her so much, for this simple, quiet support, for the absence of unnecessary words, for giving me the opportunity to deal with my emotions on my own. When I returned home that day, I immediately realized that something was wrong. I put the key in the lock, turned it, but it wouldn't budge. I tried again, then again, but it was useless. It was only then that I saw them, old suitcases taken out of the basement, standing in a neat pile by the front door, stuffed with my clothes, somehow folded, and in some places just haphazardly stuffed inside. "Mom!" I shouted, knocking on the door, but the answer didn't come immediately. "You're not welcome here anymore," his father's voice came from the other side. "We will not tolerate such disrespect in this house." I staggered back as if I'd been hit. "Are you serious?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't realize that this was really happening. "Are you kicking me out because I was upset that you stole my college money?" "Don't be so dramatic," Mom replied dryly, and I imagined her sitting on the couch, adjusting the pillow, without even glancing towards the door. "You're already 18, you're an adult. It's time to learn how to deal with your problems on your own." I stood there, looking at those suitcases, feeling sick, feeling an emptiness creep into my chest, as reality suddenly became too cruel, too implacable, too real. Cars sped past on the street, their headlights illuminated the darkening sky, lights came on in the windows of neighboring houses, someone was setting the table, someone was laughing, someone was just living their daily lives while my life was falling apart, and no one even noticed it. "What about Lily?" I asked, and my voice cracked. "Will you ever do that to her?" The answer was silence. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, my fingers trembling, and dialed Aunt Rachel, my mother's sister, the only person in the family who always treated me warmly, even if he didn't interfere in our family affairs. She answered on the second ring. "Gaynor? What happened? You sound upset." And then I told her everything. The words came out of me along with sobs, about the admission, about grandfather's money, that I was just put out on the street like an unnecessary thing, like an old toy that I had grown out of. "We'll come for you," she said firmly, and there was no doubt in her voice, only determination. 45 minutes later, their car pulled up to the house, and Uncle Mike wordlessly loaded my suitcases into the trunk, and Aunt Rachel hugged me tightly, her fingers trembling as she stroked my back. "I'm so sorry, honey," she whispered. "That's not right." That night, sitting in the guest room of their house, in the silence that was finally safe, I could afford to cry for the first time all day. Aunt Rachel and Uncle Mike came in with the check in their hands, and when she handed it to me, I froze, feeling a chill run down my spine. "We want to help you with your studies," Aunt Rachel said. "It's not the whole amount, but it's what we can do. I stared at the numbers, and my eyes filled with tears again. I'll pay you back, I croaked through my clenched throat. Every penny, I promise. We know you will, Uncle Mike nodded. Because, unlike some people, we know who you are and what you are capable of. The check said $30,000. Enough to cover what the scholarship didn't cover. Enough to change my life. The next 12 years flew by like a flash. I graduated from college after going through endless sleepless nights, difficult exams, and difficult semesters, working in the university's finance office to cover living expenses, interning every summer, getting on the list of top students, saving every dollar I earned so that one day I could give it back to those who believed in me when I was rejected by those closest to me. In all these years, my phone has never rung from my parents. Or from Lily. Sometimes, especially in the late evenings, when the city was lit up with thousands of lights, and I was sitting in my luxurious penthouse with a glass of wine, I found myself thinking about them, trying to imagine what they were doing, how their lives turned out, did they ever regret what they did. But then before I could see that picture again, the suitcases on the doorstep, my father's cold voice cutting me off, as if I had never been a part of their family, and I forced myself to return to the present, focus on my future, on what I had built, no matter what. My first job offer came 2 months before graduation, and when I saw the name Goldman Investment Partners in the email, my heart skipped a beat, and then it started beating so fast that my ears were buzzing. Junior Investment Analyst. The starting salary is more than I ever dreamed of. Prestige. Opportunities. The proof that I really could. The day I signed the contract was one of the happiest in my life, and the first person I called was Aunt Rachel. I did it, I said, barely able to keep the tremor out of my voice. They want me to start right after graduation. Of course they do, she replied, and I could hear the genuine pride in her voice. You're exceptional, Gaynor. You always have been. I stayed in the same city, not because something kept me there, but because I knew that I was appreciated here. My new life started in a tiny studio apartment where there was barely room for a bed, a small table and a narrow closet, but I didn't care because it was mine. Every morning I woke up at 5 o'clock, went to the gym, and by 7:30 I was already sitting at my desk, fully ready to work, because now my career was everything. I stayed up late, absorbing knowledge, observing senior colleagues, studying every detail, every report, every strategy, and soon my boss, Catherine, a tough and impeccably collected woman, took me under her wing. There's something special about you, she said one night when we were late into the evening preparing a presentation for a major client. You're hungry but not desperate, determined but not reckless. We need more people like you. 3 years later, I was promoted to senior analyst, and 2 years later I became an investment manager. My salary first doubled, then tripled, and then I realized that I could afford everything I had never dared to dream of. I moved from my studio to a spacious apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, where every night the skyscrapers twinkled below, as if reminding me that this world was now mine. I bought my first Mercedes, a sleek, black, immaculate C-Class, and every time I saw it in the parking lot, I smiled because it wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of my victory. And, of course, I paid off my debt to Aunt Rachel and Uncle Mike in full, despite their protests. We didn't help you so that you could give us something back, Aunt Rachel said softly when I handed her the check. I know, I replied, looking her straight in the eye. You helped me because you love me. And I'm paying you back because I love you. And because I always keep my promises. I've traveled all over the world. Paris, Tokyo, Sydney. I posted photos of sunsets in Santorini, snow-capped peaks in Switzerland, and the streets of New York illuminated by lights on social media, and I didn't block my parents, didn't hide my life, but I also never looked at their profiles. If they wanted to see my success, let them see it. I'm tired of looking back. And yet, 12 years later, One phone call destroyed this delicate balance, tore down the wall that I had been building for years between myself and the past. The week after my mother's call flew by in a blur, and then I found myself driving through the familiar streets of my hometown, and even though so many years had passed, even though I had turned into a completely different person, it felt like time had stopped here. Everything was smaller than I remembered, somehow less significant, or maybe it was me who had changed so much that these streets no longer had power over me. I pulled up to my parents' house, turned off the engine, and paused for a moment, looking in the rearview mirror. I adjusted my Chanel sunglasses, looked at my reflection, at the confident expression on my face, at the carefully coiffed hair, at the immaculately fitting pantsuit. I was no longer the girl who could be broken. The house has hardly changed. The same blue shutters, the same wooden porch swing, but now I saw things I hadn't noticed before: peeling paint, sagging gutters, small but noticeable signs of neglect. Before I could knock, the door opened and my mom appeared on the threshold. She's aged a lot more than I expected. There were streaks of gray in her once perfect hairstyle, deep lines at the corners of her lips that I didn't remember, and when she saw me, I noticed her lips twitch. "Gaynor." She sighed, reached out to hug me, but I didn't move, didn't take a single step towards her. Her eyes slid over me from top to bottom, appraisingly, as if she was trying to figure out who her daughter had become. "Look how successful you are," she muttered, and I couldn't tell if there was admiration or bitterness in her voice. "Where's Dad?" I asked coldly, stepping past her into the house. Inside, it smelled like Mom's vanilla candles and the tart aroma of Dad's strong coffee, as if time had frozen for 12 years and nothing had changed. But as soon as I took a couple of steps forward, I felt everything had changed. "In the living room," Mom said, hurrying ahead of me, as if she was afraid I'd change my mind and leave. "Hyung has a good day today." I wasn't prepared for the way my dad looked. The man who once seemed imposing, strong, and the one whose approval I vainly sought as a child, sat hunched in his chair, gaunt, with sunken cheeks and pale skin stretched over his cheekbones, his fingers weakly gripping the armrests, and his eyes, barely noticing me, lit up for a moment with that familiar light, a flash of recognition, a glimpse of the father I remembered. "Gaynor." His voice was weaker than in my memories, but it still carried that commanding note that once made me shudder. "You came." "I'm here," I nodded, sitting down in the chair opposite. He looked unwell, and that was putting it mildly. "You look bad," I remarked, watching him smile tightly, but his smile quickly turned into a fit of dry, painful coughing. "Always head on, right?" He wiped his lips slowly with the back of his hand. "Cancer. The doctors say I have a few months left, maybe less." Mom fussed around, fidgeting with her hands, as if she didn't know what to do with herself. "I've prepared your old room," she said, and her voice sounded too happy, too tense. "It's just like you left it." I almost laughed. How did I leave her? No, it wasn't like I left her. They took care of it themselves 12 years ago, putting my suitcases out the door. "Where's Lily?" I asked, not seeing my sister in the house. "Oh, she went out with friends," Mom replied quickly. "But she'll be back for dinner, she's so happy to see you." I was doubtful, but I nodded anyway. We chatted for a while, or rather, they tried to get information out of me, asking cautiously about my job, apartment, car, but I answered briefly, politely, noticing how they exchanged glances from time to time when they thought I wasn't looking. When Lily finally showed up, it was already too late. She came into the house, easily throwing off her coat, dressed in designer clothes that looked new. Her long, groomed hair shone, and a Cartier bracelet sparkled on her wrist, and although she had gained a little weight since the last time I saw her, her face hadn't changed. She was still beautiful. It was flawless, so familiar, it made me feel empty inside. "Gaynor." "What are you doing?" she screamed, as if we were best friends separated for just a few days instead of 12 years. "Oh my God," Is that really you? Is this a Cartier watch? They are magnificent. I didn't say anything, just allowed myself a quick glance at my mother, who nervously averted her eyes. Dinner was weird. Mom cooked all my favorite childhood dishes, as if food could bridge a 12-year gap, as if a plate of macaroni and cheese or apple pie could erase betrayal and silence. Dad barely ate, mostly moving the food around the plate. Lily chatted incessantly about her friends, her social life, and plans to start a lifestyle blog, and it seemed like she didn't care at all why I was here. But when the conversation turned to the future, Dad suddenly put down his fork and looked at me. We have something important to discuss. I saw my mother tense up as Lily looked away, as something flashed between them, as my sister's dark eyes darted from one figure to another, and then it clicked in my head. This is not just saying goodbye to my dying father. This is something completely different. What is it? I asked, even though part of me already knew it wasn't going to be good. Dad leaned forward, his face serious. I need you to promise me something. A dying man's wish, if you will. I was silent, squeezing my fingers around the glass of water. After I'm gone, he continued, without taking his eyes off me, I need to know that Lily is going to be okay. That she would be able to maintain her lifestyle. And you. He hesitated, as if choosing his words. You are able to guarantee that this will happen. There was silence in the room. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator, and my own heartbeat, which was pounding loudly in my ears. You want me to? My voice was dangerously quiet. Are you asking me to take care of your sister? Mom jumped up as if she was about to say something, but I raised my hand, silencing her. Financially, my father added, not looking me in the eye. You're doing so well, Gaynor, Mom finally said. You have more than enough. I got up from the dining table, and the creak of chair legs on the wooden floor cut through the tense silence, filling the room with a sharp, unpleasant sound, as if drawing a line that had long existed between me and this family, but now has become completely insurmountable. Let me get this straight, I said, looking around at their faces, frozen in anxious expectation. You called me here after 12 years of silence to ask me to financially support my fully capable adult sister? Gaynor, please sit down. Mom held out her hand to me pleadingly, her voice trembling, but I didn't know if it was a sincere plea or just another attempt to control the situation. You're making it more dramatic than it needs to be, she continued, and there was a hint of annoyance in her voice, as if all this, my reaction, my emotions, was just an annoying obstacle on the way to getting what she wanted. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. More dramatic? I shook my head, feeling anger rising inside me, flooding everything around me. You kicked me out of this house. You left my things and suitcases on the doorstep. You spent my money on college, the money that Grandpa left specifically for my education. And now you want me to support Lily? Lily, who had been sitting in silence up to this point, finally spoke. Her voice was tearful, reminding me of childhood, when she got everything she wanted. All she had to do was pout and roll her eyes. It's not fair, she drawled, crossing her arms over her chest, that you have so much money and you don't want to share it. You've always been selfish. I turned to her, really looked at her. Her perfectly styled hair, her designer dress, her expensive jewelry, her immaculately manicured nails, all this was paid for by her parents, all this was made possible thanks to their eternal protective care, and even now, when she was 28, she still lived at their expense, still did not know that, so she still believed that she was owed something. What exactly have you been doing for the last 12 years, Lily? I asked, looking straight into her eyes. While I was working 60 hours a week building my career, while I was studying, trying, striving to achieve something, what were you doing? Lily shrugged, her lips pursed, but anger flashed in her eyes. I was looking for myself, she said defensively. Not all of us want to be corporate slaves. Being supported by mom and dad? I asked, crossing my arms over my chest. And now that dad's sick, you're worried that you're going to lose your food stamp, aren't you? Don't talk to your sister like that. Mom intervened, her voice suddenly sharp and defensive. She's sensitive. She needs to. She needs to grow up. I screamed, no longer holding back. She needs to learn how to provide for herself. She needs to stop depending on everyone else to finance her lifestyle. His father's fist came down hard on the table, though not as hard as it used to be. I'm dying, Gaynor. His voice was quiet but firm, the same tone he used to dictate the rules, the same one that had once forced me to obey. My last wish is to know that my youngest daughter will be safe. I looked at him, my fingers curled into fists, but there was no pain or regret in my chest, just an icy realization. What about your eldest daughter? I asked quietly, looking him straight in the eye. Have you ever wanted to take care of me? The silence that followed was deafening. I grabbed my purse from the back of the chair. I'm leaving. This is a mistake, Gaynor, please. Mom followed me to the door, her voice trembling, but I couldn't tell anymore whether from excitement or anger. Think about what you're doing. Think about your father's last wish. I turned to her, straightened up, and took a deep breath. I'll help pay Dad's medical bills if he needs it, I said in a flat voice, without hesitation. But I won't support Lily. This is my last answer. I headed to my car, ignoring my mother's calls, ignoring Lily's dramatic sobs, ignoring all this chaos that they were trying to turn into my duty, into my responsibility. When I drove a few blocks, my heart was still racing, but my mind was clear. I pulled over to the side of the road, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number. Aunt Rachel answered on the second ring. They want me to support Lily, I said, barely able to contain my laughter, which was more better than funny. Can you believe it? Oh, Gaynor. My aunt sighed heavily. I was afraid that it would be like this. She paused, and then added, your sister hasn't worked a day in her life. And your parents. They've been providing for her for too long. The next 2 days were a series of angry phone calls and text messages. My mother and Lily bombarded my phone with accusations and pressure, trying to make me feel guilty. You're killing your father with your selfishness, Mom wrote. You've always been jealous of me, Lily wrote. You're just trying to punish me. I saved all the messages, but I didn't reply. Something inside me told me that I might need them later. When my mom called again, I took a deep breath, turned on the recording of the conversation, and only then pressed reply. Gaynor, she began at once, her voice trembling with indignation. How can you be so cold and selfish? Your sister needs you. I'm ready to help Dad, I replied calmly. But Lily is an adult. She needs to learn how to support herself. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by an angry whisper. You're not worth your sister's little finger. Pause. We should never have called you. I ended the call, pressed the end button, and dropped the phone on the table, feeling an emptiness grow inside me, the same cold, familiar emptiness that came every time I realized that it no longer made sense to expect anything from these people. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed over my chest, and stared out the panoramic window of my office, watching the cityscape where life went on, oblivious to my decisions, my emotions, or the line our family history had just definitively crossed. Then I turned to my laptop, opened the browser, and, on some sudden impulse, went to my mother's social media page. I haven't been there in years. What I saw made me grit my teeth. She posted a long, tearful post about how a heartless daughter refused to help her dying father, how she turned her back on her family, how wealth ruined her, and how, despite everything that had been done for me, I left them alone in their hour of need. The comments were full of sympathy and outrage. Family friends, distant relatives, Even some complete strangers expressed their shock, their disappointment, their indignation at me. Something broke inside of me. 12 years of silence. 12 years during which they didn't try to contact me, 12 years during which I didn't exist for them, 12 years that I lived without their support, without their interest, without their love, but when they needed me, I suddenly found myself obligated. I've opened a new post. I've told you everything. I wrote about my childhood, about favoritism, about how my grandfather's money for my education was stolen, how I was thrown out on the street at the age of 18, how my own family didn't even invite me to my father's funeral, how the only reason they wanted me in their lives again was because she could have supported Lily. I've attached screenshots of messages from my mother and sister. I've attached a recording of the conversation. I laid out the truth in front of everyone. And I ended it with a post in which I said that family is not those who are related to you by blood, but those who really care about you. The reaction was immediate. Comments started pouring in, but this time the shock wasn't because of me. People were shocked by my parents. Some relatives, with whom I had not communicated for years, wrote to me personally, apologized, said that they had never known the whole truth, that they had always guessed, but were afraid to say something out loud. Many shared their stories of how they also witnessed favoritism, how they saw that I was constantly pushed into the background, how they thought that I just left, but it turned out that I was kicked out. Mom tried to defend herself in the comments, but each of her explanations only dug her deeper. Even her closest friends couldn't justify one daughter's request to support another, fully capable, adult woman. 6 months later, Aunt Rachel called me. "Gaynor, I wanted you to find out for me." Her voice was soft, careful, but it sounded tired. "Dad died this morning." I silently stared out the window, waiting for at least some feeling, at least some emotion, to come. "Mom," my aunt continued after a pause, "she didn't invite you to the funeral." I closed my eyes. The last act of petty revenge. "Got it," I said calmly. On the day of the funeral, I did not go to the cemetery, but sent a huge bouquet of white lilies with a postcard on which was written just one word. "Goodbye, Dad." It was 3 months ago. Since then, I've heard through Aunt Rachel that Mom is struggling to maintain her usual lifestyle. It turns out that her father didn't leave her as much money as she had hoped. Lily throws tantrums because she can no longer afford regular shopping, expensive restaurants, cosmetologists, and endless self-searches. Sometimes I wonder if they've learned anything from all this. Last week, I got another call from an unknown number. I didn't answer, but a voice message came. It was Lily. She spoke softly, her voice trembling, but not from tears. There was no real regret in it, only expectance. "Gaynor, I just wanted to know if you've changed your mind." She paused. "I need some support. Until I get back on my feet." I deleted the message without replying. Now I'm sitting in my office, at my own desk, looking at the life I built myself and feeling calm. I'm sorry that I haven't been able to really make peace with Dad. But I'm not sorry that I kept my word. Some people call me cold. Some people call me ruthless. But I realized a long time ago that setting boundaries is not cruelty. I look at the picture on my desk of me with Aunt Rachel and Uncle Mike, smiling, holding a glass of champagne on my last birthday. This is my real family. Those who believed in me. Those who supported me. Those who loved me unconditionally. They say blood is thicker than water. But love is thicker than blood. And true love has no price tags, does not require payment, and does not impose conditions. My phone is buzzing. A message from Aunt Rachel. "Are you coming to Sunday dinner?" I'm smiling. Of course. I wouldn't miss it for anything. Some bridges are burned forever. But others, over time, only get stronger. And I've learned to distinguish between them.